very lo-fi edition because it's too warm. I mean, summer rugby. They're going to be hot tomorrow, Phil, at the Totally Wicked Stadium, especially the women, because they're going to get the brunt of the heat. Now, the Saints and we're going to find out who is the fittest between Saints and Leeds. That's what we are going to find out tomorrow. Not necessarily in the men's game, which we're all expecting Saints to win, but I guess we're expecting Saints to win the women's game as well. But before all that, International Week has been and gone here, not in Australia because they've got all those internationals coming up. And what did Lebanon beat Malta today? Did I read?
They did 30 points to 14, so it started in the Southern Hemisphere.
Well done, the Lebanon.
Biggest week of international rugby league for a long time.
It's all good. It's all exciting. We, of course, had our pretend international, which was hilariously the men, that is. What amused me this weekend more than anything was, and this is nothing to do with rugby league really, the reaction to England Rugby Union losing to the Barbarians. As much as that, it wasn't even the first choice England team, and everyone's got the knives out for Eddie Jones. I'm thinking, bloody hell, it's a good job. It's a good job we won. Otherwise, Sean Wayne would be out on his backside because we haven't got any of the NRL players. It was a win. It was a win, and there you go. We beat the Combined Nations All-Stars.
I think there were a couple of things. One is don't read too much into it, and I don't think either of the coaches of either of those teams were doing that. I think they realised again that it was the best it could possibly be, given the pullouts and obviously the lack of NRL-based England players. So accept it for what it is. It was a competitive hit out, which is what Sean Wayne wanted. It was a highly motivated team against him, which is what Ellery Hanley will always bring you. I think the one great positive for England was not that they won, but the fact that their defence looked really good on the line. And I would say that that's what Sean Wayne will be building on. I heard him talking about doesn't want to particularly invest in individual performances at this stage, and John Bateman's still got a lot of work to do. I mean, John Bateman to me looked like a shoo-in for the World Cup. He was back to his absolute best, and no disrespect to anybody who was at Wigan last year, but clearly he played his best rugby at Wigan under Sean Wayne. He knows how he likes him to play and what he expects of him, and vice versa. So I think there were some positives. I think Cruz Leeming perhaps set down a little bit of a marker, saying if you're not sure about who your hooker might be or who your second hooker might be, if you want it to be Mickey McAlorum starting, then I can't do any more than perhaps outplay the other two. Jack Wellesby looked really comfortable in an international arena, which is great. People are already saying what's his best position going to be. Sam Tompkins managed the team superbly. Great to see Callum Watkins back. So yeah, I mean, just accept it for what it is. The only downside for me was clearly before the game, both the RFL and Warrington put out a release saying, seating is virtually sold out. And when I tuned in, I could see half of those seats were vacant. Now, I don't know if that's part of a scheme whereby if you're an R-League member, you bought one ticket and you were allocated another two, and maybe those other two didn't come. But I know that the official attendance was listed as over 9,000. And I just think we've got to be careful sometimes that we don't create a PR rod for our own back. It was faithfully reported, including by yours truly, that's what the RFL and Warrington had said, and there were people, understandably, on social media saying you're promoting a lie. Well, I don't think we were doing that. I think we were hoping that it would be good, and I have to say the atmosphere was great, and there were a lot of people there for the women's game, which was excellent as well. But I think that's maybe something PR wise we need to look at.
Certainly don't take a picture of the players with a trophy in front of an empty stand. Although, why did they get a trophy anyway? Why did England get a trophy against France in the Women's International when they didn't against Wales the other week? Where were these trophies? Where were they from? What's the point? We're not Rugby Union where everyone gets a trophy in every game.
No, and again, I think clearly if there is nobody in the stadium and it's a photo opportunity, then maybe take those pictures in the dressing room amongst the players themselves. So, yeah, but again, I just don't think we should read too much into that game. I was concerned that we wouldn't get a lot of people there. We did. I think, that there was clearly a good crowd. More than anything, for the television, there was a good atmosphere, and that's what we wanted. I think there was an appetite for international rugby league, and, we shouldn't just focus on the 3 England games. We could talk about all of those, but that Wales played Italy women in Cross Keys and had their first win ever, first competitive win. That's fantastic. The Italian women are only really at the germination stage as well of what they're doing. So to get them to come over and play a game in Wales, fantastic. Scotland and Ireland wheelchair played as well, and the Welsh men's team went over to France, and again, seeing the pictures that came back, the crowd that was there, that looked like an incredibly worthwhile exercise and a very credible scoreline. And Wales hadn't played for over 1,300 days. French people we know are passionate about international rugby league, and they've got a World Cup now to build up to. Again, I thought that was a win-win. So it's been a really good weekend. And anybody who saw the wheelchair game would say that England-France wheelchair, which were the 2 top-ranked teams, so it should have been the best game of the weekend. It was. And again, if I was to have one minor bugbear after watching that game, that was a very strong French team. We didn't need to keep stressing and emphasising who wasn't playing for them. They picked 10 very, very good players. They will get stronger when they bring the 4 guys in that weren't there, as indeed we will. That was a slightly experimental 10 by Tom Coyd, because he included a couple of players that he wanted to see either brought back or first caps, and he may well have a very different 10 come slightly different 10 come the World Cup. Just accept that. For again, we've beaten the number 1 ranked nation. It looked magnificent. It was a fantastic game. It ticked every box you could possibly want in terms of greater awareness and it being on Sky. I think, this weekend and what's coming in the Southern Hemisphere, it's just heartening, because I believe this is the low-hanging fruit of rugby league into the international game, and the sport would be so much better if, as I'm told, we're going to get maybe next month a regular calendar.
How many times have you heard that, though?
Well, that's why I wouldn't. I wouldn't necessarily write a headline about it, but yeah, I think it was put off slightly because of the delay in the World Cup. Because this year, 2022, should have been the start of international competition that leads into qualifying for the 2025 World Cup. So that's all been delayed and a bit concertinaed. But again, looking at what's happening with the African nations, and the fact that they're going to be on a qualifying.
It's just nice.
Sorry, did I go off then?
No,
I went off here.
I think.
Oh, sorry.
Your battery stopped. It was like you stopped, but
no, I couldn't hear myself, so I thought I'd gone off. But no, it's like the conveyor belt has started in places like Africa and the Americas, and this is what we want to see more of it, and the talent pools that we can tap into are not in the traditional areas anymore, as may have been hinted in the current issue of a certain half decent magazine, as it's called by one of its columnists, not me. But you go into the international dimension, and you'll find players.
You do need a break from Super League and the Championship and League One, especially Super League, where you do get a lot of the same fixtures come along with great regularity. So it's nice to have a break from seeing Wakefield against Salford again, which comes up this week, which is a big game. I'm looking forward to that.
But there will be injuries as well. There's always collateral damage, and there will be some players who, unfortunately, will come out of those games and not be able to play for their team this week and possibly longer. But that is why I think the domestic season needs to be foreshortened to try and take account of that.
And there'll be, as we see with international sport, thousands at Headingley over the next few days, getting in this weather. Geez, I hope the St John ambulance are there.
Wouldn't you like an ice cream franchise?
Some giant beer snakes on the notorious Western Terrace. But people like international sport. People will be watching the netball in the Commonwealth Games who wouldn't have watched it before and stuff. So let's hope we can capitalise on the World Cup.
Well, I think you're right about the cricket, because a lot of people will buy those tickets in advance, but actually it's a dead rubber. But it doesn't matter. It's international competition, and it should always be the pinnacle of any sport.
Ben Stokes will get a trophy at the end of it. I don't know what England and New Zealand play for, but I'm sure they'll have the Baskerville Shield, obviously. But they'll play
the Sir Richard Hadley Trophy.
It probably is, actually. I think you're right.
I just made that up.
I think it's had they both of them. I don't know. There'll be some trophy anyway. It's not sponsored by Texaco anymore. That was the olden days, or cigarettes. So it was a positive afternoon at Warrington. Whatever the crowd was, everyone seemed to enjoy it. That was good. I still think it's perhaps, especially with the All Stars concept, something you can take outside of our world, and it might attract people to watch. And when I say world, I don't mean just take it to Doncaster. I mean somewhere further afield, like Newcastle or something, because you can sell an All Stars team to the people at large, because they don't really know who's an All-Star anyway. But we can.
But I think the issue for that is something that we touched on last week. That if you are going to do that, if you're going to take it to a potentially new audience, you need to name that All-Stars team earlier than the Monday of the week of the game and build up the rivalries. If people don't really know who this All-Stars team is, you can tell some stories about them. The trouble is, Ellery doesn't know who's coming into his camp until literally, well, as we saw with David Fafita, as the phone rings, in he comes. So I think it is hard to take that out of a traditional place. I would hope. I think we know as well that from next year, all of the internationals are going to be moved to the end of the season, and that's going to happen in both hemispheres, I believe. So there will be a return to tours of some description or other, and that will be incoming and outgoing, which is great. So I think if we're going to have a proper international calendar between world ranking nations with every game counting for ranking points, there is no All-Stars concept anymore. So
the All-Stars has been and gone. I mean, I would like All-Star voting like they have in America, where the fans vote, and granted, everyone will vote for their own favourite players, and it'll be like the statue at Wembley all over again. In the game before,
I think the issue for that as well is that there has to be an equal distribution of talent as well. So it wouldn't be fair to say to St Helens, we want 4 of you players for England and 6 of you players for the All Stars, and then they're playing a reserve team the next week. It has to be a balance, and I think both Sean Wayne and Ellery Hanley sat down and said it's not necessarily about picking necessarily the best 17 who is available for the All Stars. How can we get some equity across the competition and make sure that all the coaches will agree to release their players? So
does that mean we're going to get rid of the combined nations after 2 years?
Well, I would. Anything that you can't get a cap. That was the other thing on the commentary. Of course, they were talking about people getting caps, and there won't be any. So I get that for this year. I think we said it on last week's podcast. It was important that England had a meaningful mid-season international that meant that Sean Wayne could take all the footage he needed from it and go back to the players and say, that was what I'm looking for. That's not, you excelled yourself. You're not in my thoughts anymore. Whatever it might be, and that was probably the better option that was available. But no, I don't see a future in that.
Big controversial anthem news, of course, last week from Courtney Winfield-Hill, who said she would sing both when England play Australia, if England play Australia. So, that'll upset the right kind of people. So that's good. And she looked right in England colours. We need to ask her wife, though, because she's won a World Cup. We need to get some advice on her and how to win a World Cup, because congratulations, England, on beating France. But we've still got some work to do. Emily Rudge, record cap holder now as well. Despite being ridiculously young. So,
and again, there were some good individual performances, but I'm not sure they gelled as a team. I think there were similarities against the game against Wales, and it's not about whether they won or lost or how many points they scored. It's about, did they look like good combinations? And I think there's still a bit of work for Craig Richards to do on that. But the great thing from a French point of view, and a couple of their players were astonishing on defence. There was a front-on tackle by their hooker that was as good as anything I've seen this year in Super League. They are improving. And again, International Rugby League is, yes, it's about your nation doing the best it can be and laying down a marker, but it's also about having more and more competitive games. If England play France in the women's game next year, then we can expect even better out of France.
It would have been great as well for England assistant coach Dec Hardman to get a week in camp with Leeds halfbacks Courtney Winfield-Hill and Georgia Roach ahead of this week's game, as St Helens, led by Derek Hardman, take on Leeds with Courtney Winfield-Hill and Georgia Roach. That's me being cynical and funny. Don't take it as serious. Oh, but someone's been in touch. Last week, I said, why were Wales playing England at the same time as games in the Super League? And it's because they had to fit games in because Castleford dropped out of the top division and moved into the second one. So they had to play them at some point. Now, I still stand by they could have played them later in the day, but that's why there were games on. Not that they affected the squads, of course, as we know. But it's going to be interesting game on Thursday night. And the interesting thing from Australia is now there's a salary cap in the NRLW. There is money there. Young British players, and you see the story today of the 3 northeast-based Leeds Rhinos players looking for money for petrol because it's expensive to come and train and play. So there's no money in our sport. Some of our young players have, if they've got the opportunity, and it's not easy just to move to the other side of the world or whatever, but let's hope they can get some of them over there and get their experience in the NRLW.
I think there's a couple of things with that. The first is that the NRLW is expanding to 10 teams, and it was only going to be 8. So clearly they are going to be on the lookout for talent. Or each of the teams that have been accepted are all linked to men's NRL teams, and they all have, I think, a great reservoir of proven talent. So they are self-sustainable at the moment anyway. But I do think that there will be an opportunity perhaps for maybe let's say a Georgia Roach who's still very young and incredibly talented, and a former woman of steel of teenage years, not that long ago, to maybe go and test herself over there, and it wouldn't do the England team any harm whatsoever. We just got to be a little bit careful that we don't lose too many of our resources in the same way that the men's game is facing that as well. We have to be aware of the fact that sooner or later we do need to look at some kind of payment for top echelon women's Super League players who are in an international program, and I think that will come because I do think that the increasing interest in women's sport will bring commercial sponsors, whatever that sport, and it might well be somebody who doesn't deal in rugby league at the moment and isn't at all interested in the men's game. It could well be that there is a sponsor out there who has seen the fact that the women's sport brings such a benefit to companies that sponsor them, that they'll look at rugby league and say, well, for very little we can invest in that. I think the World Cup is massive for that, for getting commercial investors. I also think that clearly whatever instruction or advice IMG are taking, and they haven't now entered into a consultation period with the sport, I would imagine a lot of people will be saying to them, we need to promote the women's game, get some money in it. It wouldn't take a lot to. I don't think the players want to go full time. It's very hard for them. A lot of them have got, very valuable jobs in teaching and the service industries, and wouldn't want to give them up. They, a lot of them are family people as well, and have young families. So, I don't think they're looking necessarily to be full time rugby players, but certainly with the with what's happening with inflation at the moment and the cost of living crisis, then yes, I think they would welcome a contribution towards their training expenses, and I don't think we're that far off that.
4-game ban for Rhiannon Marshall at York. I've not read the reasoning because they haven't put it up on the RFL website, because it's something for me to read when I get bored. But so York will be on. I don't know who York play this week actually, because the big game obviously is Saints versus Leeds tomorrow. As you mentioned, the Woman of Steel. What does the best player in the wheelchair Super League get?
The Wheel of Steel.
Is it the Wheel of Steel? Because I was wondering.
No, I don't know.
Because these are the questions we need to. I'll ask them on Saturday. I'll ask what do they get? Because we know they get the Golden Boot. We know that. So yeah. Because it's men and women, whatever gender, you can play a wheelchair rugby league. So you can't just have a Man of Steel. So we need to find that out. That's the thing we need to find out. England beating France. Very impressed with France going for drop goals. Always good to see a 1-0 scoreline in rugby league. That's always good.
I'm guessing that somebody said if you get to the last on a set of 6, then come away with anything. Because they were 20 points down, I think, when they went for the second one, which was, again, not going to change the outcome of the game. But what a spectacle.
Labrias instead of Librias. No, great game, and great ahead of the World Cup that England have shown they can beat France because France are the holders, and it gives a little bit of extra spice ahead of the tournament coming up.
Can't wait. I think that there's a genuine rivalry there. I think, again, people like Seb Bashara, who plays in France but is an England international, it all adds to the magic and the mystique. No, I'm sold. All being well, we'll be in Hull on a Saturday afternoon for the Wheelchair Challenge Cup final, which is the version 2 of England and France, isn't it? With the Rhinos against the Dragons. So I'm expecting that, again, that rivalry will be carried into the club environment. As somebody said to me this week, it is actually the World Club Challenge of Rugby League, because they are the two best teams from different international areas. At the moment, it's not an Australian team. So it could be double billed, if you like, as not only the Challenge Cup final, but the World Club as well.
Oh, let's put that as an extra event. Let's have another one. Let's get that at the end of the season. Although not this season, because we need to keep the players fresh for the World Cup. But let's kick off next season with the Champions of Super League versus the best team in France as another idea. It is something where every time there's a wheelchair game on TV and people are exposed to it, they all go, "Oh, it's great, this." We just need to find a way of capitalizing on that and saying, well, here's the next one. I mean, it's all right this week because here's the Challenge Cup final, but after that, where's the next one after that? We need to get these games out there somehow in a more easier to find format for people.
Well, there's going to be obviously the continuation of this year's Super League tournament in wheelchair, and again, I think you're going to get the chance to, if you're a Wigan fan or a London Roosters fan, to see these games. They're on your doorstep. So I would encourage everyone to check out where they're played. Local sports hall to you if you live in the north east or the northwest. Go and see a game. You will not be disappointed. And to see it live is different again, as we've often said.
And now, having had less than an hour of experience, I'm obviously an expert on the thing. So get me on the telly. I could be on the BBC this week. Get me on there. I could.
It's all right, Jamie Jones. It's all right, Jamie Jones. We kind of getting in a chair and pretending he now knows the game. You've done that session.
I've done it. I mean, I hid on the wing, which was very much my career in rugby league as a whole. But I've done it now. Has anyone been sacked this week? I'm not caught up with.
Eamon O'Carroll left Newcastle
for a job somewhere else, which hasn't been announced yet, has it?
Catalan Dragons.
Assistant
coach. He's going back to France.
Fair enough. I mean, Newcastle's all right, but I see people saying, I don't fancy, if you're a coach, you wouldn't fancy Newcastle because you don't appear to have the last say over signings. But is that the case at every job? I don't know. Obviously, Rowan Smith is starting.
Well, they've just
Leeds as well, isn't he?
Well, they've just signed Oliver Roberts, who's not a bad signing for the Championship, the current Ireland international. So no, I think with an investor there, you actually would take on that job because you've got real potential. I think they have underachieved a little bit from what I think we expected this year, and I don't think that's why he's gone. I think he's gone because he's been offered an opportunity to go back to France and be involved in a very, very professional setup under Steve McNamara, and why wouldn't you turn that down? So no, I think Newcastle is a plum job for a coach for sure.
Featherstone rather signed 2 players this week, so I know Lee have just extended the contact of the man who was key in the 1895 Cup final in the Pape, but we'll see who else they sign this week, because no doubt someone will. As the Championship returns this week, having had a week, I saw people getting upset that there was no Championship or League One action last week, but it made sense if there's internationals, and Wales and Scotland and Ireland and what I know they all didn't play, but they are going to take players from the lower divisions more than the Super League. So
yeah, I think it was a shame that Scotland didn't play Ireland. They did at wheelchair, but not at the men's running game, and I think that would have completed a nice set of fixtures, and those nations, if they played, if Jamaica had managed to play an international, which I know they wanted to do, then again a lot of Championship and League One players would have been involved, so it made absolute sense to have a clear weekend. What doesn't make sense, we were talking about this when the Challenge Cup final was on, and certain junior leagues were scheduling fixtures is on Magic Weekend. The same thing is happening. That that there are certain junior leagues not a million miles away from Newcastle that do indeed have teams from the northeast in some of their divisions saying, we expect you to be playing cup matches and continuation cup matches and rearranged league fixtures at the same time that Magic's going on. And you're going, no, we should be taking the kids to Magic if we're serious about, filling St James's Park, giving them a great experience, them saying they want to go back for the start of the World Cup. We have to be better coordinated as a sport.
I mean, I have no ties to amateur rugby bar my nephews play for a club, but I don't have any. I didn't play for a club when I was younger. I haven't watched them, so I've got none of those ties to things. But it does appear sometimes that we're almost beholden sometimes to the community game or the amateur game, and everything should focus on. People won't like me saying this, but everything should focus on Super League because that's the top division, the one that sells everything, that sells the product to everyone. But I know that can't always be the case, but.
Well, I think if you're a young kid of your nephew's age, and he's playing for his local, and he's playing for his local team, and he sometimes gets taken to Wakefield or maybe heaven forbid Featherstone. I only say heaven forbid because I know that's an anathema to your good self. I would take a kid to Featherstone at the moment. And
I took him pre-season.
Yeah, I know. You've got family. But you would think that the chance to take them to a major stadium and a big event and get them used to perhaps the World Cup's going to be even bigger than this, you would want to do that rather than necessarily playing another game in his own junior league. And I don't know why we can't coordinate things better.
Well, sometimes we can't. I'll tell you what was surprising. I didn't realise this until afterwards because I was working last Saturday. No national radio coverage of an England Rugby League International last week, which is a bit. I know it's the Rugby Union Premiership thing was on and other stuff, but that seems to be a bit bizarre. Mind you, it probably doesn't come under any kind of radio broadcast deal we've got. So,
yeah, I think that's probably it. That it's a fixture that is arranged in addition to that goes out for sale, or But I am surprised that even there wasn't a local radio presence in the northwest that then could have perhaps fed it into a commentaries page for the nationals. But I think the fact that the BBC are doing all 61 games of the World Cup across all 3 tournaments. I think there'll be a lot of interest in the PDRL one as well, which is an associated tournament. But clearly, I think Adam Hills will play for Australia in that, and that'll give it some some impetus and kudos. I think we will see International Rugby League front and centre for 5-6 weeks, and it's what we do after it rather than missing a mid-season game that had limited value. We did make the headlines this week though. For first news item on most broadcasters.
I woke up. I was awake in the middle of the night, and it came on. What was I listening to? Classic FM. I mean, they never have Rugby League on their news bulletins at 5 a.m. What's going on here? Well, there you go. Sometimes we exist. Sometimes.
I think we might have more to say on that next week.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have anything to say because we haven't got a clue, but I'll guess.
Well, I just think it's got to be a very nuanced way of dealing with it rather than hard and fast. The fact is rugby league is a contact sport. It isn't golf, it isn't darts, it isn't snooker. There is, as we've said, a duty of care and a health issue across the sport, which the sport hasn't said it's banning forever transgender players playing. It's saying it needs more evidence, and so for the moment they're not going to allow them to play in the World Cup. That's what it actually said. Nobody's actually been banned, whatever the headlines may say. And I think let's say, and I heard this example used this week, so it's not mine, but it's a very good one. Let's say Leslie Viner-Colo decided he would transition. No reason why he shouldn't. We would all support him. You wouldn't want him necessarily running at Courtney Winfield Hill at this particular moment, would you?
I don't know. Is he still any good? When we get in the England team?
Be better
no, and the same duty of care argument goes to Women's Super League teams who throw 16-year-old girls into their squads before.
Yeah, I just think
it is a difficult.
No, I think the whole thing is we are an inclusive sport. We've got evidence of that, including, we may have some more on that next week, which is vitally important. There is an opportunity for most people, irrespective of sex, gender, race, whatever it might be, to play and be involved with and welcomed in rugby league. But clearly there are some margins where we just need to make sure that, there was talk in Australia, I think Phil Gould may have suggested it, that, we're obsessed with age groups with kids. You're under 5 or you're under 6 or you're under 10. Actually, what we should be obsessed with is things like height and weight and development. And you shouldn't be pitting somebody who's 10 and can grow a beard against somebody who's 10 but hasn't yet started maturing in any way whatsoever. Let's have that debate. Let's make sure that everybody is included in that debate. Let's try and keep every door open as best we can, but also let's bear in mind that if we're serious about duty of care, there may be certain opportunities denied for the greater good of all.
Let's have that debate when we've got someone who knows what they're talking about on the program.
It's a very good idea. I think all this has shown is I certainly don't know what I'm talking about.
As opposed to people on forums and social media who don't know what they're talking about. But it's the latest bogeyman to.
But it definitely isn't. Somebody should or shouldn't. I think it just has to be a bit more than that.
So the World Cup is coming. We're excited. Rugby League in Super League and the Championship and League One is back this weekend. Double header at the Totally Wicked Stadium on Thursday. Saints versus Leeds, both on Sky. That's going to be good. Wheelchair Cup final on Saturday. So it's going to be a great week. There you go. There's inclusivity for you. Men's Super League, Women's Super League, and the Wheelchair Challenge Cup all on TV in some form or another over the next few days, which is what we want.
And we're getting there. And in wheelchair, as we've said, it's mixed gender, it's people with different abilities and disabilities, and they all play together, and that is the utopia we're trying to get. And just because a headline says banned, let's all not get a bit carried away at the moment.
We need to promote our personalities. Channel 4 did that with their little film about Joe Westerman. Why the official Super League podcast continues to not speak to players and speaks to administrators, I've got no idea. And they've got more listeners than us, so I can, it's punching up, not punching down. So it's all right. I can't understand. They've got access to everyone in the sport, every single player. I don't want to hear from administrators, he says, getting someone in the program in the future. This is a different thing. There's your shop window.
The other thing is, are you tearful about the end of Bellevue? I know that you're.
It's only one stand being knocked down, so I'm not looking down the whole thing.
Well, you don't know that it might be like a domino.
Well, it just all falls down.
Could do.
Well, you have to find out when I make my documentary, which I've got the rushes for, apart from the bit where I messed up where I was sat. Don't have to re-record that bit. But it's progress, Phil. When they knock it down, when it's built, that's when we'll know.
They will come. Build it.
They will. Right, we'll be back next week with stuff. There's nothing else going on, is there?
There's transfers. Clubs are announcing players. Alex Mellor signed for Castleford. Good luck to him. Good signing for both parties. Warrington had just announced that Paul Vaughan, who I would call, although he's played for Australia, state of origin, highlight of his career clearly was playing for Italy in the World Cup. He's coming over, and Jason Clark's going to France. So, there's going to be a fair bit more player movement, or we're going to know a bit more about the player movement that's actually already been signed. So, looks like Leeds have got Justin Sangaré for next year, which is an interesting signing. Becomes their third Frenchman in their history.
Wow. I think
if indeed he does arrive.
Freddie Bonquet, I think he played. One for the teenagers.
Patrick Onta.
Yeah.
Eric Anselm.
Yeah.
And Sangaré will be the third. He's obviously heard that Raymond Blanc has a restaurant in Leeds.
Well, it's better than the chicken shop in Huddersfield, isn't it? So Enjoy the weekend. We'll catch you next week with a longer program. It's too hot. It's too hot to do podcasting.